Welcome to the Connectable podcast.
The Connectable podcast starts in 3, 2, 1.
Yes, I'm always excited for our guests, but I would be lying if I said I wasn't a little bit more excited for today's guest. He is a hip hop artist, speaker, professor, and author who just released his book titled "He Saw That It Was Good: Reimagining Your Creative Life to Repair a Broken World." Sho Baraka, what's going on, sir?
Oh man, Josh, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk with you about my book.
Yeah, man, I'm like I said, man, I'm really excited. I'm just going to be honest. This may not be the most professional thing to say, but you are my favorite artist, man. And so I didn't want to say that. My wife's like, don't say that. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to say it. I can't help myself. I got to be honest, man. I've appreciated your work for a long time, ever since Turn My Life Up all the way through So Many Feelings. And
look at this.
Yeah, well, the crazy thing too, man, and I know we want to get to the book for sure, so I don't want to get sidetracked too much, even though we have a tendency to do so. The crazy thing about So Many Feelings for me is you released that maybe 6 months into me getting married. And the interesting thing about that project is that every time I listen to it, each year I'm married, every time I listen to it, it changes how it sounds to me, because I'm in a different place in my marriage, and I don't know if you intended it to be that way, but it's just we could talk about that forever, so I'm not going to do that. But it's all of your work, man, has just been incredible to me. And the thing that I was trying to think about, I'm like, why is Sho my favorite artist? And something that I've heard you talk about both on songs and interviews is that sometimes artists don't grow up with you, and either the artist gets stuck or the audience gets stuck, and the artists themselves grow. And I feel like the weird thing about you, and I'm sure you have artists like this for yourself, is that I feel like as I've grown up, your music has grown with me, and your speaking, the things you speak about, the things that you talk about have grown with me as well. So it's like it's always resonated with me. And I think it's a really interesting thing. And I feel like that's, we always share how we're connected with our guests, and that's how I'm connected with you, man. I've been listening to your work for a long time, and I just appreciate it. But yeah, man, I'm excited to jump into all these different topics. I have a million questions, man. So I hope you're ready.
I'm ready. First of all, you're starting off great, Josh. I want to let you know that.
Well, I appreciate that, man. And I want to say this too. I feel
all this flattery is excellent.
Well, like I said, I don't want to start that way, but I couldn't help myself. So I want to point this out too, man. You've done I feel like a million interviews up until this point, and I've been listening to all of them to try to avoid asking you the same question for the millionth time. But I feel like listening to all these people that you've talked with, these people are incredibly intelligent. And I don't know if you heard this story about a month ago. There was this homeless man that snuck into USC's football practice, and he was he was using their jacuzzi. He was eating meals with the team, and he was even fielding punts during practice until somebody's like, "Hey, we don't know this dude." I feel like I'm that dude right now. I feel like at some
point, hold up.
Yeah.
Wait, hold up. So how young was this man?
I don't remember.
Did he look like a college kid?
I would hope so. All they said was it was a homeless dude just snuck into practice, and they said that a current player, confirmed all of this. He said, yeah, nobody noticed, but he was using the jacuzzi. He was talking to guys. He was eating at their dining hall. And like I said, the last thing they said is he was fielding punts on the field.
And so at this is like a catch me if you can situation.
That's exactly what it's like. That's how I feel in these interviews, man. It's like I listen to all these incredible people. I'm like, someone's gonna say like, "Hey, Josh and Connectable does not belong." What are they doing here? But
well, let me say this: that there are interviews that I turned down because so there are interviews that I take because the platform that they have.
Sure.
There are interviews I turned down because of the lack of platform, because it's like, if you don't have a website, if you don't have any kind of social media, it's like, well, why am I doing this? Like, you don't care enough for me to really come on to your platform. And then there are people that I come on who may not have the biggest platform, but it seems like they care about their platform, but they also may be fans. I know your name. I don't know you. Like, if we walked in, we could probably bump into each other at a grocery store, and I wouldn't know who the heck you are. But I know your name because I've seen it so many times come across my social media feed.
Sure.
And so when you ask for an interview, I was like, what type of artist doesn't like take interviews with the people he can, like, if I can recognize your social media handle and your name and I turn you down, then that to me is like, that's a shame as an artist who's especially somebody like yourself who says like, those turn my life up there. I'm like, okay, well then this man supports. So that just kind of like, so don't feel like you don't belong. You belong, man. You got into the party.
I don't know how
you may not be able to dance. You may not be able to dance as good as everybody else, but you're in the party. You know what I'm saying?
Perfect.
You're in there. We're gonna have a good time.
I'm gonna take that. Man, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm not gonna go down this road, but I have so many questions about some of the interviews you've done over the years. So I've listened to a lot of them. And I'm gonna say it. I don't know if you feel comfortable with answering this. Sometimes I feel like you get invited to do these interviews, and I'm not convinced that some of these people really understand who you are or what you do. Am I wrong about that?
Josh, you are so head on. Like I don't think 80% of the people. Well, okay, so let me say this. I think they know me, like they know my music. Sorry, I'm knocking stuff over. They know my music. They may have heard of me, but they don't know me. Like they don't know the nuance of me. They if I do a race interview, they just assume like, oh, he's one of the woke folks. If I do a Christian hip hop, he's one of the Lecrae guys.
Sure.
If I do an interview about art, they're like, oh, he's kind of like a disciple of Mako and these guys. And it's just like, oh, I mean, I'm a little bit of all those people, but I'm actually like this, my own kind of polymath individual that's trying to create a tribe of folks who are like me. Oftentimes people call me a contrarian, and I think I've kind of accepted that. But I'm not a contrarian to be like for contrarian's sake. I think I'm a contrarian because I oftentimes see the shadow and fully adapting into a particular ideology or tribe. And oftentimes when you're a part of a tribe, you take on all of the gold and you take on all of the shadow and you defend it to a point where it could be very dangerous. And I am the kind of person who looks at Blackness, and I love Blackness, but I also see the dangers of Black nationalism. I'm a person who loves the church, but also see the dangers of what the church does to people when it lords over them. I'm the type of person who loves politics, but also see the frailty in politics. And and I love Christian hip hop, but I also seen the idolatry in which Christian hip hop can be, and the sense of how it pushes a piety, better yet, a piety that's not authentic and real or biblical. And so for me, I think a lot of people interview me and they just don't understand, to your point, like who I am.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When I listen as a listener and as a fan, I hear some of the questions, and again, I don't know if this is okay to say, but some of these questions drive me crazy. And hopefully I don't ask any of these questions, but it's like, man, it's
you setting yourself up right now, because if you ask some stupid questions, you didn't,
Hey, let me know, man. It'd be an honor to get roasted by you for sure. But no, well, let me ask you this, because this is one of my questions. I have a couple of just selfish questions that I wanted to ask you, and then like I said, I want to jump into the book. Obviously you're doing a ton of these interviews. You've done a lot of interviews over the years. What is one of your least favorite questions to get from people?
The Reach Records question.
Yeah. I'm so glad you said that, because I told my wife is that I hate it so much when people ask you that question, because however many years it's been since you've been with them, I'm like, are we not going to get past this?
Yeah, facts. It's like, oh my gosh, like, yeah. But I will say, recently I haven't gotten a whole lot of those questions. I didn't even I could have spent a lot of time even in my book talking about it, but I didn't really talk about it in my book that much at all, because I just don't want that to be the conversation anymore. I just want people to move past it. But yeah, that's one of the conversations. The Reach Records question. What else?
I'm trying to help everybody out.
There's
here. Yeah, I'm just trying to help people out. Like if people are listening to this, like just mark these off your list and don't ask these ever again, because we don't need to hear it anymore.
Yeah, I'm sure I'll come up with some other ones, but that's the one that just always is like, oh gosh, why am I?
Perfect.
Sometimes
Okay.
I've even told people just to watch other interviews. I said, just go listen to other interviews. I've addressed this before.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I actually kind of get sick. I get sick of the Lifeway question too now. Lifeway is like, I'm like, okay, the joke is getting kind of old.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Those are the two that I can think of off the top of my head.
Perfect. Well, we're in line because I'm those always irritate me too when I hear those. Like, you got to ask this man a better question because, like you said, if they look at your work, it is so much more interesting than just those two questions. But for whatever reason, people just want to hold on to that. And kind of going towards your book, like that's part of your story, that's part of your narrative, but it's not. It's nowhere near the entire picture. It doesn't even come close to painting the whole picture of who you are as an artist and what you believe. So it's like I feel like we're missing so much when we focus on those two questions. At the time it was like, okay, cool, it's interesting, but now it's like, it's like you said, so many years later, let's keep it moving and move on. So that being said, I don't want to, like I said, you're a musician, you're an artist, you've done so many great things. I want to point people to other great interviews and say, hey, if you want to learn more about who Sho is and as a musician or artist, check out some of those things. Check out your social media. You'll learn all those things. I want to talk about this book because, they say you can't judge a book by its cover, but this cover is dope. And so I'm like, I kind of feel like you could, because as soon as I saw the cover, I'm like, oh, I think we're in for a treat. And I think that just speaks to, again, I think when people take the time to, put together a really dope cover, and then the way it's written is creative, where it's not just, you sharing some of these thoughts about narrative and creativity and story, but you also have these stories within the book, these almost like short, I don't know if you call them short stories, or I don't know if they would be considered, but just the whole packaging of the book and the way it was marketed, it's like, you can tell you're an incredibly creative person. So tell us a little about the book before I start answering or asking some of these questions.
Can I tell you something about the cover? I want to talk about the cover real quick.
Please.
Never had to tell you this. So first, before I get into this funny story, I want to say that Penguin Random House, Waterbrook Magnoma did a wonderful job with the final cover. However, that's not the case with the first couple iterations that they sent me. We had a long conversation. The book process is a very long process. People don't know, like some people don't know. It takes almost a year. I mean, it takes at least a year in most cases for a book to be released. And so you have all these conversations about, dozens of things. And one of the things that I often talked about with my publisher was having some sort of creative control. And hey, I would love for I don't want to just talk about creativity and talk about a creative life and everything else be like lame. So to your point, I wanted to have short stories, and I wanted the cover to be great. And I wanted to capture folks. Well, I tell you, I sent them the idea. I said, this is what I want the cover to look like. I kind of gave them descriptions. I wanted to have these elements, boom, 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 boom. They sent me this. I wish I could show you. The first cover they sent me, it was the worst. It looked like the book was written in the 50s. It had no imagination whatsoever. And I was sitting there thinking, like, are they serious? And so I gave them a little, I said, hey, good try. Here's some things that you may want to consider. Send me another iteration.
Yeah.
It was like they didn't even try. It was like they just probably changed a word or two. And I was like, this is terrible. I don't want to. We went through four different attempts. And then finally I was like, look, I'll hire somebody with my own money to do this cover. And they were like, no, we really want to get this right. And so
it doesn't seem like
it. What I did. But once again, they did a wonderful job. And it could have been just my lack of communication. I don't know. But I basically said, all right, here's some examples. And I actually sent visuals, some visual elements. I was like, here's some types of covers that I like, but I really wanted to have this kind of design and element to it. And I promise you, like, it was like night and day. I don't know if they just went to a different designer, because it was like the first few attempts were terrible. And then all of a sudden it just drastically changed. It wasn't like a progression. It was like terrible. And then the cover that you see right now. And I was like, what? I don't understand what just happened. I don't understand how this just changed so quickly. Because, But it was amazing. It was great. And it also taught me to trust people and
There
to
you
not
go.
just give up so easily.
Yeah.
Professionals, they've done this a million times. And so yeah, but I also had to fight for some of my short stories too. Like
Okay.
you know, there's one story in particular that they wanted to cut out altogether because they felt the book was kind of long. And I was like,
Really?
I'm not cutting out a short story. So
Yeah.
yeah, because I wanted to really capture the creative imagination. Like, you talk about how people can use creativity and work and art, to be more specific, in my case, to shape a better world. I wanted to give people examples of how to do that and not just talk about art. Most of my frustration with conferences about like art conferences or messages about art is that they're not artistic at all. Like I've spoken at many art conferences and I was like, there's nothing artistic about this conference other than pastors talking about art and how you can use art, or they'll have a musician get up there and sing a song, or a spoken word artist do spoken word. I'm like, how about we do the presentations in an artful way? Like, just don't get up there and speak in a sermon through notes. Do some sort of theatrics around you. Like, I don't know, do something creative.
Yeah, for
So I
sure.
wanted to kind of add that element because I believe my next book is going to be an actual novel. Like that's my goal.
That's awesome. Yeah, no, I'm with you when it comes to, especially, man, a lot of those, yeah, you're right. A lot of those conferences, when they place an emphasis on art or creativity, you look around and it's like, it seems like it's just lacking there. But, the problem with some of those things too is I feel like they've been allowed to get away with it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
because to the point of your book cover, how many artists do you think, or authors do you think, said, "Hey, I'm writing this book. Can you give me some cover art?" They send that first draft and like, "This looks dope. Let's just do it." It's like there was no critique of it at all. You didn't say you have any thoughts about. I mean, like you said, you went through 3 or 4 before they finally said, "Okay, this is right. This is what it should look like. This is the creative visual that I want people to see when they pick up my book." But some people are like, "Yeah, that works," and they're just cool with it. And I think that's where a lot of that problem comes from. I think people just, like I said, especially in churches, I think there's, in my opinion, I feel like there's a low standard, and a lot of people just say, "Okay, this works for us."
Because the expectation of excellence is quite low,
Right.
because competition is not high, and I don't want
Yeah.
people to be competitive in a sense of to tear each other apart or to dominate, but competitive in a sense like look to your left and your right and see what is there is there a rising of greatness that forces you to be good. Like if you're on a team and like I love soccer, football, and one of my teams that I follow is Manchester City, and Pep Guardiola is the coach, and he's notorious for making superstars ride the bench if they're not playing well in their time.
Yeah.
And so you have to make sure, like, you look, if somebody else is playing better than you, then guess what? I don't care how much you get paid. You're going to be sitting this bench
Right.
because right now you're not in form. And what happens is those players who expect to play or expect to get applause get comfortable. And I think oftentimes, to your point, like we've just been allowed to just coast in contentment and in satisfactory contentment, if you will,
Sure.
when we should be challenging ourselves to be great artists and not just good enough to appease people who don't really understand art to begin with, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that brings me to a question I had for you about your whole book process. What is your, I guess, circle of like trusted critics look like? The people that you reach out to and say, "Hey, this is what I'm working on. What do you think?" Like, how big is that circle? Because I know I've talked to some people that have written books or done some kind of project, and I've seen it both sides. I've seen some people are like, "Well, I didn't send it to anybody," and they have nobody in their circle critiquing or pointing out, maybe trying to sharpen what they're doing. And then I've seen it on the opposite side where they send it to everybody and their mother. And it's like, well, this is not even a focus group. Like you have too many opinions and now you have no focus on what you're doing. So what does your circle look like as you're creating a project, specifically this book?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the type of person too. Like for me, ideas that are, I'm the type of person who is a public thinker. And so very rarely So most of these ideas in this book are not things that I haven't kind of either spoken about in public or given a lecture about at either a college, a university, a church, organization. And so when I share my ideas publicly with people I don't know or with people I know, that gives them the opportunity to critique, to push back, to affirm. And so when you do take it from the platform to the page, you've had some criticism already, you know. So hopefully the people who are writing books are exercising this exchange before they even put the thought to paper, because the first time somebody's going to critique it is the editor. And if the editor is not a good editor, then you're in some trouble. Praise God, I had a gentleman, Paul Pastor, who was excellent, creative in some way as well, who loves fiction. And that's the other reason why I felt like he helped me with this book, because he understood not only writing, but he understood an artist's writing. He understood that I wanted that poetic voice. He understood that I love analogy, I love metaphor, that I'm a rapper. That so sometimes the language is not going to be like, so you have the process, you go through a editor, you go through a content editor, and then you go through a copyright editor and all this other. And so sometimes the copyright editor would come back and say, hey, this is not how this sentence should be framed. But I'm like, no, I'm gonna push back, because as an artist, this is kind of like how I want it to communicate. Like, that's not how I would say that. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you have to be careful that some things that may need to be edited, that the publishers want to edit, you try to fight and keep it as an authentic language to your listeners or to your readers. And so those people, so one, I share my ideas publicly, bring it to the page. My editor, you know, was thoughtful, was great. But then I also share with a few people. So some people who are creative, some people who are academics, and some people who are just, I think, strong thinkers. Like they may not be the best writers, they may not be artists and creatives, but when it comes to like a social intelligence, they have that. And I say, hey man, what do you think about this particular thought, this particular chapter? And then usually when you get endorsements, the people who endorse, they sometimes read it. I don't think, if let's say I had 12 people endorse my book,
Sure.
I'll probably say like 3 people actually read it.
Yeah.
So the tendency is like, you know, those people usually, you know, well, sometimes it's too late to make substantial changes, but you can go back and tweak things here and there. But, you know, you try to run thoughts through people who you would consider your mentors, people you consider you mentor, and those folks who you are co-laboring with who may have good or opposing thoughts. So yeah, and it's always good to have a dissenting voice in your group too. Somebody who you know just disagrees with you on a lot of things.
Yeah, for sure.
Maybe somebody from a different, maybe somebody who's not necessarily, say if I'm a Christian, they may not even be necessarily a Christian. They may, let's say if I was, you know, this political party, they are a different political party, because you want them to be able to wrestle with the ideas that you have and say, either they can say this argument I disagree with, but it's a good point, or they'll say, no, this is totally wrong. You've gotten this wrong. And in that sense, you want to say, okay, how can I communicate this in a way that's not necessarily wrong, but it's right, but they just don't agree with it.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's so important, having those people. And I definitely have those people in my life. I'll shout out my brother. He's definitely that person. In fact, I'll probably send him this interview and say, hey, how do you think I did? And he'll let me know, unfortunately. it may hurt my feelings, but he's like, that was a dumb question. Why'd you ask that? But I think, man, that's so important, especially if we want to be the best versions of ourselves. And if we want to, you know, be our most creative selves, I think you have to have those people in your life. And again, I think if you know, if your feelings get too involved in it, you know, in that process, then it's going to be tough hearing what those people have to say, right? Because it's like, well, you know, you feel a certain way about your project and maybe you're holding on to it like your baby. But if you're willing and open to have those conversations with those people, then I think it's only going to make you better. You know, as much as it may suck in the moment, it's like, no, this was good. I needed to hear this for sure. Which brings me to my other question I want to ask you, just in general about your art. And I don't know if it's too early for you to hear any of this for your book, but what is it like being, I mean, your work is always being critiqued as an artist, whether it's music or you're writing or a speaker. Your life is basically just you're being critiqued all the time, whether you like it or not. Like, how long does that take to get used to? Are you at a point where it's like, it is what it is? Or are there still moments where you're like, this is nonsense, that this is part of my life?
Personally, I don't think it was hard for me to necessarily to adapt. I think I've always been a performer.
Okay.
You know what? I think because I played sports in high school and I wanted to play sports in college,
Okay.
that I got used to the critique. And I also played quarterback in high school. So, and this wasn't
Yeah.
Southern California. Southern California football is huge.
Sure.
So, you know, CIF. I mean, I'm getting into the weeds, but anyway, there was like it was a substantial platform, and so I think I got used to being critiqued in papers at schools, and so performance for me was a part of life, and being critiqued for performance became a part of life. And so when I transitioned into public art, I don't think it was hard for me. I think the one thing that I had to adapt to was the consistency of criticism from people who aren't professional critics, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what happened is when I grew up, you know, there was no YouTube, there was no social media during high school. When I got to late college, that's when YouTube started kind of getting prevalent. But by that time, I wasn't really, you know, I didn't have anything for people to critique in any way. But then, like in 2008, when I started becoming more popular, my first album and, you know, Reach Records started to kind of exist. That's when I started to realize, like, oh, like anybody can say anything they want and just leave this comment on the internet forever. And it's like,
right.
So you spend your time defending yourself, and then eventually you like, you know what, like, let these people live, like, let them, it's fine. So I know some people who can't handle it. Like my wife is a visual artist. She paints and she does murals.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember she did a mural that's like a staple in the city of Atlanta. And if any of you guys who live in Atlanta go to Ragorama, if you look at the Ragorama, my wife did the mural all around the building. And so movies love, like people contact us for movies, say, hey, we want to put your mural in a movie,
wow,
commercials, whatever. And she's been interviewed for it. And literally hundreds of comments, positive. One person was like, oh, this is trash. It's X, Y, and Z. And it broke my wife down. It's just, she was like, oh, I can't handle it. I don't want to do this anymore. And I was just like, this is crazy. Like, this is like one critique. Like, that's it.
It's a pretty good day,
and
right?
So
for you.
She's not built for that life. And
sure.
She will, like, she's been discouraged from doing work and, you know, recently because and not just painting, but like design or interior design and things like that, because like she'll do 3 people's houses and they'll be excited. And then she do another house and the person was like, oh, it was okay. And now she's like, you know what? I don't want to do this anymore. And I think you have to realize that the world is vicious and they will let you know. And a lot of these people who will let you know are people who have no credibility in the vocation or no credibility in the space at all. However, you know, that means something to you because, to your point, you hold tightly to it. But even if they do have credibility, I do think there's a balance of listening to people and not listening. Like, you should listen to people because it makes you a better artist, a better human being. And then it also teaches you how to critique people as well. Like, I try to be a lot more charitable about how I critique folks. When I'm serious, I mean, like when it's like a skit or a joke, I'm all over the place, so I can't. However, but there's also times when you need to just tune people out, you know? But if you only tune people out, then you're tone deaf, obviously, and then you're creating a vacuum. But if you listen to everybody, you're indecisive and you're a people pleaser and you never make authentic art.
Right. And I'm glad you said that, because actually is a perfect segue into this next question. So in your book, you have just a really simple line, but I thought it was interesting because it says, at other times, I censor myself for the weaker ear. And so I thought that was interesting because I feel like, because you do music, you're a writer, like I said, you're always being critiqued. On the flip side of that, the purpose of you putting out your art is to communicate certain truths or ideas to people. And obviously, and we won't go into it, but obviously you've had some moments and some different songs and things that have sparked controversy. Air quotes there because I don't understand it, but
Right.
to other people, it becomes a controversial thing. And so when you're writing a song or writing your book, how do you decide how to communicate something? Because obviously you hear people say like, well, you just got to be real and authentic, but you also are trying to communicate something to someone so that they receive and hear it. But you also don't want to cater so much to them where you're watering down what you're saying. So it's got to be a really bizarre place to be as an artist. So personally for you, how do you navigate those waters where you're like, hey, they need to hear this, but I also need them to be able to digest it at the same time?
Yeah, part of the tension is the consumerism of art. And so you have to know who you are. And when I say you have to know who you are, it's not just who Sho Baraka is, but you have to know who, like, what does Josh say that I am? Who does what is the masses saying? Like, and if for instance, there are a lot of, for the longest period of time, or even today, there are a lot of artists who like, I'm not a Christian hip hop artist. I'm not a Christian hip hop artist. But if everybody calls you a Christian hip hop artist, then I don't know what to tell you. You're a Christian hip hop artist. Like, you can create that, so you can try your best to fight and push up against the definitions. But the reality of it is the masses determine who you are. The market in a lot of ways determines who you are until you can actually change and I guess you can say deconstruct the market. So that matters a lot in how you communicate and who you communicate to. So until I'm able to loosen myself from the extreme restrictions that Christian music has on an artist like myself, then it's almost futile or even ridiculous for me to expect them not to go crazy when I say a penis, nigga, bitch, hoe. But even if I'm not saying it in ways that are demoralizing people, but I'm saying it to make a point. You know what I'm saying? And so the reality of it is I have spent years trying to remove myself from those restrictions. And I think now I'm in a place where I have more liberation to communicate the things I want to communicate and use words that I want to use in a way that I think are healthy and helpful, because that's just what I believe about strong language in general, and that's a whole nother conversation.
Sure.
But I also recognize the consequence of removing myself from those restrictions, because now I'm no longer safe for a particular market. So you'll have particular people who will say, well, Sho's not necessarily safe for this particular youth group, or he's not good for this particular festival because of the type of content he makes. And so therefore I have to acknowledge that I won't get the festivals. I won't get the particular conferences. I won't, because of the type of stuff I make. And I have to be cool with that. Now I have to figure out how to create my own markets, create my own lanes, or find a space that will accept and love that. And so I think they're growing. I think those spaces are happening and it's starting to develop more. I think more artists are starting to create their liberation. And I think that's a lot of what I was trying to communicate, even in like chapter 5. But yeah, I mean, I think it's good for, I can't remember the original question. I started ranting.
No, that was good. I mean, it's basically, I guess how sensitive as an artist, how sensitive do you have to be to like I said in your line talking about, some ears can't take it. And see, the interesting for me, just thinking about it personally, talking about, it's like when you're talking about youth group music, some of the stuff, when I first heard your stuff, I heard it at some of the youth groups I was going to. For me personally, and I think I can speak for a lot of people that are fans of yours, if you would have stayed in that world and in that kind of music, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation right now, because I don't know if your music would still resonate with me. You know what I'm saying? And it's interesting because, like you said, some people may just be stuck in that area. It's like, well, cool. There's plenty of other artists out there, but if you want to continue to grow. Yeah, exactly.
Market incentivizes it for people to remain there and stay there, and not only just the Christian market. Every market,
everywhere. Yeah.
People got shocked when Jay-Z made 444. I mean, it's like, well, he finally. It's debatable, but a lot of people were like, finally, he's talking about grown-up stuff. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Yeah. I wrote a song, as as a fan, I wrote a song called Peter Pan for Talented 10th.
Yeah.
And that song was my lament on the extended adolescence of hip hop. And I was, I thought about many of the artists that I appreciate, and I'm like, here I am, this dude in his 30s, and I was trying to connect with, some of my favorite artists, but they're writing songs about the same stuff they were writing about when I was 18 years old. And I'm like, bro, like, we're grown now. Like, I've yet to really hear anybody rap about financial literacy, like rap about raising children. It's like, do you guys not like marriage? Like, this is, because they're still writing songs for 18 and 20-year-olds.
Right.
Because the market says that's who you have to market to. The reality is hip hop now is mature in a sense, like you have people who are in their 50s who are pioneers in hip hop. So you don't think the fans have grown as well? They don't just jump to jazz automatically. Those folks don't just automatically want to start listening to Anita Baker. Like, we want Anita Baker and we want Common. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah,
so it's
absolutely.
like, help me out. Give me some content, my friend.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, I just want to go take us kind of into a different direction. Has Waffle House reached out to you yet for a sponsorship? Because I feel like, man, every interview I've heard, Waffle House has come up. So I feel like they need to connect with you or something, man.
I don't think Waffle House does commercials. I don't even know if I've ever seen a Waffle House ad commercial, or it's because they don't need it. It's just like we don't need your help, because guess what? We're on every corner and people want us. I don't care how much fun you make of us.
Yeah.
People want us, and they're going to eat our food. And I'm one of them. I'm like, it's crazy. If there's something that people know about me, friends, they know that I have a very bourgeois palate. I do not eat fast food. I do not eat chain restaurants. You talk about Applebee's. I haven't eaten Applebee's since I was broke as like a young married man. Like, it was
okay.
like, but now if it's a chain, the only reason why I'm going there is because my family wants it, like Chick-fil-A.
Okay.
However, when it comes to Waffle House, my friend,
it's a different story.
I don't know why I love Waffle House. Does it for me. Waffle House it's next level for me. I don't know what it is, but
see, man, I'm jealous because I live out in Sacramento, California. So I don't think we have Waffle House here, but I keep hearing about it now on these interviews I'm listening to, and in your book, I'm like, I got to make a special trip just to get some Waffle House.
I think I went to the West Coast, and there's one in Denver. I don't know if there's one anymore west of Denver, but and it didn't feel right. Because I went to Denver and my friend was like, let's go to Waffle House. And I was like, say less, King.
Yeah.
So we go to we go to Waffle House. And it was a little disappointing, not because the food was bad, but it was so clean. It was pristine. The building was nice. It looked like it was just recently built. And I was like, this doesn't feel like Waffle House. This feels like a fraud. This feels like pseudo Waffle House.
Yeah.
But I'll eat it, because I'm pretty sure the food is going to be great. But this ambiance, I need somebody smoking a cigarette while they're making my pancakes. I need like somebody walking around with a pistol on their hip.
Yeah.
Like, I just need a whole bunch of chaos. I need somebody's child jumping from booth to booth.
There you go.
Like, that's what I need in order for me to enjoy my waffles.
All right. Well, I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm taking notes on all this stuff. So when I finally make it out to a Waffle House, if I don't see that stuff, then I'll know I'm not experiencing the real thing.
Yeah.
And at one point, before I get to a couple more questions for you, I do want to point this out too. So, when you suggest something, there's a couple people in my life, when they suggest something, I'm like, okay, I'm going to take that suggestion seriously. Now, I'm not a soccer fan. I'll admit that right now. But a little while ago, you suggested Ted Lasso. And you know what I mean? And then my brother, who I also, his opinion is pretty high on my list. He also suggested it. So I'm like, dang, I'm about to watch this soccer show, because two people I respect say so. It's amazing. My wife and I went through that very quickly. I love that show.
Bro, I don't like dealing in hyperbole, my friend.
Yeah.
Sometimes I do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm pretty extreme and eccentric.
Yeah.
I like to call myself an aficionado of television. I probably may try to write reviews for TV and film.
Oh, nice.
I have to say, that is probably one of the best TV shows I've actually watched in a while.
It's good.
It's definitely top 5 in the last 10 years for me.
Well, man, the jokes are so tight, like
They're
airtight.
excellent.
Yeah,
airtight. it's just, and it's so appropriate and necessary for our time to have that Ted Lasso character. Like, it's just so, it's necessary. It just, there's so much around that story and that TV show that I'm like, this is brilliant. And you don't even have to care about soccer. You don't have to know anything about soccer because the main character doesn't know anything about soccer.
And that's why I relate. I'm like, I'm with this dude. I don't know what they're talking about, but I love it.
Right.
Well, that's what my brother said too. And my brother's like, hey, he's like, you can't help but watch that show and smile. He's like, I'm just smiling the whole time. Like, it's just one of those shows that makes you feel good. And yeah, it's incredible. Like I said, the joke writing is just so tight. I'm a fan.
My wife who hates everything I like. Her favorite thing to do is just be in the room while I'm watching something, but she'll have like her own little headphones on.
Sure.
Or she'll just do, her own little thing. And like, as series would progress, as episodes would progress, like she'll go from like, this is stupid, to like peering in every now and then.
Yeah.
To like being fully engaged towards the end of the season.
That's amazing. Well, that's how yeah, go ahead.
My daughter as well. She started watching it and she's picked up like it's funny though. My daughter's 16.
Okay.
And so when you're watching it, you don't really think about how crude and sexual it is. As an adult.
Yeah.
But then when your daughter starts watching it with you, like, hey, because of the lightheartedness and the like, it feels very family friendly.
Yeah, for sure.
Feels really lighthearted, but when you're actually watching it with like somebody who's 16, you're like, oh, hold up, that's a penis joke right there.
It kind of sneaks up on you, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, okay, all right, but yes, anyway, it's good, man. I love that show.
Yeah, no, I'm not there yet. I have two daughters. One's 2.5, and then one is about 3.5 weeks old. She's a newborn.
Woo!
And
congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. So I'm not there yet, but I will say I'm starting to. You had a tweet a little while ago about how your daughter was basically saying, "Hey, basically, Pops, why aren't you more famous?" And I laughed at first, and then I'm thinking, like, I'm looking at my future because this is going to happen to me one day where my daughters are just going to roast me. In fact, the other day, my daughter, I was holding her, my 2-year-old, I was holding her, and she kind of threw her head back and she hit my head. And you could see the tears start welling up, and I'm like trying to, prevent that from, turning into an outburst. I'm like, oh no, it was just a headbutt. It's all good. And she started giggling. That was the funniest thing. Well, now when I hold her, she's turning into like a rugby hockey enforcer where she's trying to headbutt me now, and she'll call it out. She's like smiling, like headbutt, boom, right across the dome. Like, what have I created? I was trying to, help her and prevent pain, and now I've created a little monster who's trying to take me out all the time.
Yeah, she's out here trying to give you the full bam
all the time.
That's so matters, bro. Put her on the soccer field and give her,
She might be a lot of red cards coming her way, I feel. But so hey man, let me just ask you a couple more questions. I know we got to get you out of here. We only have you for a few more minutes. But one thing, because this is called Connectable and our whole goal is to get people more connected. One of the things that I just found really interesting about your book, and I want to make sure I get some of these quotes right, was you said so, but too often background, class, status distract us from receiving the essence of what someone is saying. I think that's so interesting because I think, especially right now in this current climate, I think, I say it's perfect timing for this to come out because it's just so interesting. Like I said, our whole goal is to get people connected, but one of the things that prevents us as a people from getting connected is all of these different things that you're saying, like whether it be your background, class, status, race, whatever it may be. It's the thing that's preventing people from getting more connected. And there's almost like this either unawareness or unwillingness to, dive into some of those conversations. So like I said, there's a lot there, and I hate to throw that at you at the very end of this conversation, but can you just explain a little bit more about what your heart was behind, that idea?
I think oftentimes we just see like one of the greatest distractions towards unity is race. And oftentimes we easily see race as an obstruction for dignity towards a particular people. But I also find that class and background oftentimes impedes that affirmation of dignity as well. And the whole idea of a gentrification is not solely for racial, like solely a racial component, and nor is it solely a trap of like housing. I think there are gentrification of ideas, a gentrification of practice. Sometimes people who are of the same race, in some ways, impede the growth of folks who are of a different class of them because they feel like their ideas are better, and so it manipulates the way that a particular group of people think from a lower status, right? Oftentimes I find it frustrating that, you know, politicians, no matter what area they're, no matter what city they're in, speak for particular people that they actually have no real connection with. And they've been on Capitol Hill for years upon years. They now have big houses. At one point in time, they maybe were connected to the people that they serve, but no longer are they. And so when the people speak, are we listening, no matter who they are? And one quote that I added in my book was from Howard Zinn. He says, every cry of the poor is not legitimate. However, we will never know what true justice is if you never listen to them. And for me, I just hope that my ears are always listening to people's cries. I don't care if it's the cries of sexuality. I don't care if it's the cries of transgenderism. I don't care if it's the cries of whatever. Like, even if I can't understand it, if I don't necessarily fully rock with every tenet of their belief, I want to be able to listen and understand, because there may be a possibility that I may be wrong. But when I have a belief system that I hold to very strongly, and I have zero humility, and I am angry, we are putting ourselves in a position to do great damage. And I feel like most of our society today has strong beliefs about something. We have zero humility about those beliefs, and we're angry. We want to weaponize it. And right now, I feel like we're just doing a whole bunch of damage to one another. And so I was like, man, how about we just shut up and listen for a time period, and then have civil debate, civil discussion.
Well, that's so good. And that's another one of the lines that I have written down here from your book is, to be a good storyteller, you must first be an honest observer. And if you're not observing, if you're not, you know, like you said, if you're not just kind of closing your mouth sometimes and observing what's around you, and like you said, getting connected, like you said, and that's, man, I feel like there's so many, this could have been like a 3-hour podcast, man. Yeah. 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 But man, it's just so good. And I think there's so much, you know, I wanted to kind of touch on some of the things in the book, but also I want people to go get your book for sure, because they need to read it to fully understand some of the things we've been talking about. But yeah, man, it's like I told you before we started recording, I read this in, I think, 3 or 4 days. I've never read a book that fast, and I'm not just saying that because you're on the show. I really haven't, but it was just that enjoyable, and you know, that I don't know, that necessary. Like, there's so much good stuff. Like, I feel like the book now is orange, because I was using an orange highlighter. The whole book's orange right now, bleeding through the pages. So yeah, man, I appreciate it.
I will say this. This has been a great interview, but you kind of failed me in one area, bro.
Oh, no.
You had the chance to be the first person to ask me a question, and you about the book, and you didn't, and I'm a little disappointed.
Dang, now I'm disappointed too. I thought this was a good interview. Now I'm gonna go home, or, you know, talk to my wife like,
I've done dozens of interviews. Not one interview has asked me about the fiction in the book yet. No one's asked me about the fiction. And I'm kind of like a little hurt.
Yeah, now I'm hurt. You know what? This may have ruined my day. Like, this started off thinking, I'm like, you know, it's an awesome day. I start off talking.
And I was wondering, I was like, I wonder if he's going to ask me. Because if he asked me that question, if he asked me a question about the fiction, then I was like, you know, we'll be on. This would be top shelf.
Okay, well, let me say that. Let me try to salvage it real quick. Let me say that.
Okay.
I'm not going to ask you specifically about the stories, but I will say, reading the stories, you mentioned Toni Morrison in the book, and you also mentioned Toni Morrison in your interviews. I feel like that's apparent that's an influence on the writing, because I remember when I was a junior in high school, we had to read Beloved, and I'll say I'm gonna be completely honest with you. People in that class hated that book because I think it's a heavy book, and it's a
No,
lot
I know
to
people
take.
who are notes with that book, like people who love Toni Morrison and
Yeah,
they literary gene, like they are bibliophiles, and they don't like Beloved. Toni Morrison's not an easy. She's not an easy. Like people love her because she's Toni Morrison.
right.
But a
Sure.
lot of people who love Toni Morrison, who just love the idea that they really didn't read her, like all her books,
Sure.
and they don't like Beloved is just it's the idea of Beloved. It's not necessarily the book that they love.
Yeah.
And I find that with like people who are larger than their work. I not only read her literature, I read her art, like her essays. I love when she's just talking about just things. I'm like, I want to know what she thinks about this stuff because she's sharp.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, it's okay for folks to not like Beloved. I think it's fair. I think that's fair game. Beloved is a difficult piece of work.
But I feel like for me, I would have to go back and read it because I mean, as a junior in high school, I feel like it's a tall order. But I feel like if I read it now, I feel like I would have a different perspective on it. Like I feel like I could appreciate the art behind it. But I will say that, man, like you mentioned her quite a bit, and I feel like that's evident in your stories. I don't think I salvaged it. I still jacked up this interview, but dang. I love the story. I'm just gonna say that. I love the stories.
You didn't jack it up. You just could have hit a grand slam, and you just you hit a home run.
But that's generous. I feel like
there were two people on base.
Let's just say this: I'm a big baseball fan, and back when I was playing, I was too slow, so I feel like I hit a lot of triples that should have been home runs, and I'm just too slow to make it home. So I'm gonna call this a triple, and
it's a triple.
I'll take a triple. I can't take a home run. Definitely, like you said, definitely not a grand slam. So, hey, man, before we get you out of here, the one question that we like to end with is what we like to call a connection suggestion. Whether it's a brand, a person, an organization, whatever it may be. Is there something, someone that you want our audience to be aware of and get connected with?
Can I do two?
You can do as many as you want.
Okay. Well, the two off the top of my head. Let me do three. I'm gonna do three. One person and organization is kind of easy, is because I helped start the organization, but the AND campaign and my brother Justin Gibbity. Justin Gibbity is a sharp dude. He's the president of the AND campaign, and the AND campaign is a social political organization that's trying to bring Christians towards political literacy and get them to see the Bible as the authority, not political parties. And so we're building chapters all across the country, but you could do more research. Just kind of search the AND campaign, AND campaign. The other organization I would say is Jude 3 Project. My friend Lisa Fields does great apologetics, more specifically geared towards minority issues, but she's a beast, a wonderful thinker, a wonderful galvanizer, has wonderful content, has interviewed some great people. So Jude 3 Project, that's another one. And then third is an artist that I just been crazy about recently, guy who's been a fan of mine, but now I'm become probably more a fan of his, a guy named Timmy Coker, who is a visual artist, and he has done stuff, I think, for the Grammys now and Coca-Cola. I don't know. He's just really dope, but he has a particular style that is really dope and really interesting. So, yeah, those are good peoples.
Perfect. Make sure you guys go check all of those people out. And then where can they follow you on social media and all of those things?
They can follow me on all platforms at Amisho, AMISHO, Baraka, BARAKA. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, MySpace, Black Planet, all of those.
There you go. And if you can't find them, you're not trying hard enough. So, hey, Sho, man, this has been an honor. I definitely appreciate your time. And like I said this a couple times already, everybody, make sure you check out his book. He saw that it was good, Reimagining Your Creative Life to Repair a Broken World. You will not be disappointed. and you'll hear all about those stories that I failed to ask Sho about. So, there we go. Thank you, Sho, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, man. You have a good day, bro. It was a pleasure talking to you.
All right, you do the same. Thanks for watching the show. If you enjoyed that episode, make sure you like it, share it, and hit the subscribe button to get a new episode every week. We'll see you next time on the Connectable Podcast.